All right, let's face it, our students are absolutely bombarded with content every single day. So how do we teach them to do more than just, consume it? Well, today we're going to break down a really practical strategy to turn them from just passive viewers into truly thoughtful, intentional creators. And really, this is the big question for all of us, isn't it? When your students see a video or read an article, do they just kind of let it wash over them? Or do they stop and think, wait, who made this? And who is this for? Getting them to make that leap, well, that's exactly what we're going to tackle today. So just so you know where all this is coming from, we're pulling from two fantastic sources. We've got the official guidance from the Georgia Department of Education, and we're mixing that with some really smart, on-the-ground strategies from Academic Solutions. Okay, here's our game plan. First, we're going to talk about why this is so important. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty and decode the specific learning standard. After that, I'm going to introduce you to a fantastic strategy called RAFT. We'll see what it looks like in action, and then we'll tie it all together to see how this empowers our students to become creators. All right, first up, why context is king. And let me tell you, this is so much bigger than just one classroom standard. We're talking about teaching a fundamental, it's basically a survival skill for today's world. It's that ability to think critically about every single piece of information they come across.
And the big idea here is actually pretty simple, but it is so powerful. It's this: nothing, and I mean nothing, gets created in a vacuum. Every single text, whether it's a TikTok dance or a science textbook, was made for a specific reason and for a specific group of people. The second our students really get that, it's a game changer. That's the light bulb moment.
Okay, so let's dive in and get specific. We're going to break down the Georgia ELA standard that really brings this whole idea to life in the classroom. Now, it's got one of those fun codes, 3-5.T.C1. But don't get bogged down by the letters and numbers. We're going to focus on what it actually means. So first things first, there's a key term we need to know: multimodal text. It sounds complicated, but it's not, I promise. It's just a fancy way of saying that text isn't only words on a page anymore. Think about it. It's podcasts, infographics, videos, basically anything that uses a mix of ways to communicate a message. So the standard really breaks down into three super clear parts. First, part A is all about getting students to figure out the purpose and audience of a text. Then, part B is about recognizing how the different modes, like video or audio, are used to actually influence that audience. And finally, part C, this is where they flip the script and become the creators. They take everything they've learned and build their own stuff. It's this beautiful cycle, right? From analyzing to creating. Okay, so that's the what. But the million-dollar question is, how do we actually teach this stuff? Well, that brings us to a strategy that the source materials call a secret weapon for the classroom. And I love that.
It's called RAFT, R-A-F-T. And it's just a super simple acronym that gives students a way to organize their thoughts. It stands for role, as in who's the creator; audience, who are they talking to; format, is it a video, a poster, what; and topic, what's it all about. It's just a brilliant little framework to guide their analysis.
And putting this into practice is super straightforward. It follows that classic I do, we do, you do model. So the teacher starts by modeling the whole thought process out loud. Then the class does one together using the RAFT tool. After that, students team up in pairs to try it on a new text. And finally, they're ready to fly solo and use it on their own projects. See? It's all about building them up step by step.
Okay, that all sounds great on paper, right? But what does this actually look and sound like in a real classroom with real students? Let's walk through a quick scenario that comes straight from the state's guidance.
So it all kicks off with the teacher just thinking aloud. And listen to the phrasing here. This is key. I notice, and then which makes me think. See that? The teacher isn't just blurting out the answer. They're showing the students how their brain works, how they find a clue, like a bolded word, and connect it to a bigger idea, like who the audience is.
The next move is to put two different things side by side. So you might have a straightforward article about plants next to an opinion video on the same topic. This lets students see crystal clear how the format changes everything. They can literally point and say, okay, this one uses facts to inform, but this one uses the speaker's feelings to persuade. And it's cool because they can also spot how different clues, like bolded words in one and cartoons in the other, can actually be aiming for the very same audience.
And this is what you're aiming for, a student response like this one. Notice how the student isn't just taking a wild guess. They're actually using evidence, comparing the two texts to back up their claim. They explain why they think the video is an opinion. That right there, that's critical thinking, live and in action. All right, this brings us to the last step, and honestly, it's the most powerful one. This is where we move past just taking things apart, and we start empowering students to become intentional creators themselves.
So now that RAFT tool we use for analysis, it totally transforms. It's no longer just for looking at other people's work, it becomes a blueprint for their own work. Before they even write a single word or draw a single picture, they use RAFT to make choices. Okay, am I making a slide deck to inform or a poster to persuade? RAFT helps them line everything up, their format, their message, their audience, before they even begin.
And really, that's the whole point, isn't it? The ultimate goal here isn't just to make them good at dissecting media. It's for them to internalize this whole way of thinking so that making those smart, strategic choices about their purpose and their audience just becomes second nature in everything they create.
Look, when we teach them to see the who and the why behind every text, we're doing so much more than making them better readers. We're handing them the keys to become way more powerful and intentional communicators. So the only question left is, what powerful message will your students create next?